Hey, hi, hello there, and welcome back to Formula Amateur. Today we'll be discussing the Chinese Grand Prix results a little bit later than what we should be doing, but soon we'll be back on track. And just in case you were wondering, I do have some great news for you right at the end. So let's get going and discuss how the Chinese Grand Prix went, shall we? So let's start from the bottom to the top in first practice 1. So in 20th, we had Jack Doohan, who was still getting the grasp of the car and being able to just make a position. And then we have Bortoleto at 19, Lawson in 18, Hadjar in 17, Verstappen in 16, which was quite shocking whenever he's anywhere below 5th. And then we had Sainz in 15th, Gasly in 14th, Stroll in 12th, Behrman in 11th, Tsunoda in 10th, Antonelli in 9th, Alonso in 8th, Albon in 7th, Hulkenberg in 6th, which is amazing for a Sauber. And then we had Russell in 5th, Hamilton in 4th, Piastri in 3rd, Leclerc in 2nd, and Norris in first position. So as expected, the top teams would be at the very top, except from Red Bull, which Lawson found it very difficult in China, and then I'm not sure what happened with Verstappen, but he did make up for it later on. Now, China is a sprint race location, so we only had first practice 1, and then we went straight into sprint qualifying, which saw Lawson in the Red Bull at number 20, which was very disappointing, and it did not bode well. He already had a tough weekend in Australia, and now China was not looking so good for him. Followed by Hulkenberg, which is now typical of Sauber to be low down. The fact that he wasn't last is quite amazing. And then in 18th we had Ocon, 17th we had Gasly, Doohan in 16th, so that's a little bit of an improvement from first practice 1. Then we had Hadjar, then we had Bortoleto, then Sainz, Behrman in 12th, we had Alonso in 11th, Stroll in 10th, Albon in 9th, Tsunoda in 8th, Antonelli in 7th, Norris in 6th, Russell in 5th again, Leclerc in 4th, Piastri in 3rd, Verstappen in 2nd, and Hamilton 1st. It was great to see Hamilton get a grasp of the car so quickly, and being able to put it P1 in qualifying for a sprint race was amazing. It shows that he can be very effective regardless of his age or how long he's been with another team. He is very adaptable, and he's quick to adapt as well, which is great to see because it was his dream to join Ferrari, just like I guess anybody's dream would be to drive for such an iconic team. Now, you may notice that I didn't mention any crashes or any crazy things going on. That's because it was a relatively uneventful race until after the race, actually, and that's the main race. So the sprint was relatively uneventful, with Doohan in 20th and then Hulkenberg in 19th, just the same as where he qualified, Bortoleto in 18th, Sainz in 17th, which was quite disappointing considering the expectations we have for Sainz, although he is in a Williams, so it's a bit of a shaky one, that one. But Williams are doing better as they go along. Then we have Ocon in 16th, Behrman in 15th, so the Haas is close together. Lawson improved a little bit, he was in 14th from 20th, so that's quite good for him. That's the only positive he had that weekend, to be honest. Then Hadjar in 13th, Gasly in 12th, Albon in 11th, Alonso in 10th, Stroll in 9th, Norris in 8th, Antonelli in 7th, and then Tsunoda in 6th, Leclerc in 5th, Russell in 4th, Verstappen in 3rd, Piastri in 2nd, and Hamilton took the win, his first ever sprint win and he can take that as his first Ferrari win as well, which was fabulous to see. So now we go into qualifying for the main race, and as I mentioned previously, not a good weekend for Lawson because he ended up qualifying 20th, which is not where you expect a Red Bull to be, and this was his final qualifying in the main Red Bull team, spoilers. And then Bortoletto in 19th, Doohan in 18th. He's been struggling throughout the weekend as well, but not as badly as Lawson because of where the team should be in comparison. Behrman in 17th, Gasly in 16th, Sainz in 15th, Stroll in 14th, and then Alonso in 13th, Hülkenberg in 12th, Ocon in 11th, Albon in 10th, Tsunoda in 9th, Antonelli in 8th, Hadjar in 7th, Leclerc in 6th, Hamilton in 5th, Verstappen in 4th, Norris in 3rd, Russell in 2nd, and then Piastri taking his first maiden pole qualifying. And what a way! He had an excellent weekend in China, and it was just meant to be for him. So now we go into the race and the shenanigans after that. So during the race, we had one person who did not finish the race, and that was Fernando Alonso, who unfortunately on lap 4, his brakes started catching on fire, so there was just no way he could finish the race, and let alone continue it. And then we had 3 people who were disqualified after the race, which were Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, and Pierre Gasly. So Charles Leclerc and Pierre Gasly were disqualified for being underweight. Leclerc didn't pit for a second time, and as a result lost a lot of weight. He lost an end plate, which is next to the front wing, and also China has a habit of being very harsh on the degrading of the tyres, specifically the front left. This was the biggest effect there, and as a result they couldn't catch enough marbles, which is just loose rubber coming off people's tyres, to make up the weight. So Gasly and Leclerc were a kilogram underweight, as they increased the weight expectation to be at least 800 kilograms, and they were say at 799. Last year the minimum was 798, so that was sort of extended, but we expect that to fall next year because next year the weight of the cars is meant to decrease as well. And then Lewis Hamilton, well, he was disqualified because a wooden plank that is underneath the car was too slim for the allowance in regulations by the FIA. He was 0.5 millimeters too teared off, like the plank was just missing 0.5 millimeters of wood, and as a result he was disqualified. And if you want to put this into perspective, 0.5 millimeters is how thick a bank card is, so that's how small of a margin he was disqualified by. And a kilogram, well, that's like a bag of sugar. That's not a lot of weight. So yeah, not a good time for Alonso, Leclerc, Hamilton or Gasly. So as a result, our bottom spot is actually 16th, which was Tsunoda, who was only there because he was let down by Red Bull, Racing Bull's strategy, and as a result he pit too late, and it wasn't an ideal situation to pit twice, but also obviously Leclerc didn't pit twice either, where he probably should have, but Racing Bulls decided that they will pit twice, and it wasn't the strategy to go for them in this scenario. And then Hülkenberg finished 15th, Bortoletto finished 14th, so the Saubers at the bottom, what a surprise. Doohan in 13th, Lawson in 12th, which was a bit of an improvement, but the day didn't get better for him after the fact. And then Hadjar in 11th, which is pretty good considering the fact that Racing Bull strategy year was not on point. And then signs in 10th, this was because of all the disqualifications going on. A lot of people moved up a bit. Stroll in 9th, and then Behrman in 8th, Albon in 7th, Antonelli in 6th, Ocon in 5th, Verstappen in 4th, Russell in 3rd, Norris in 2nd, and Piastri took his 3rd win of his career. So it was a McLaren 1-2, and that's 3 races in a row, including Abu Dhabi last year, that McLaren has won. And then we go into the side stuff. Let's go into the side stuff, shall we? So now we go into the side stuff, yeah. So we discussed the 3 disqualifications, and as a result, Ferrari lost a lot of points, and people were moved around, shuffled about, and promoted in terms of their drivers' championship points, and Ferrari ended up with 0, along with Gasly, but he didn't have any points to lose because he wasn't in the top 10. Alonso missed out on points because of his brakes failure. And then, as I mentioned numerous times today, Lawson. Between the Chinese Grand Prix ending and now we go into the Japanese Grand Prix after a week's break, Lawson has lost his seat in Red Bull. He was moved to Racing Bulls, which some people are seeing as a demotion, some people are seeing as a promotion, as the Red Bull racing car is just not as easy to drive. Even Max Verstappen is having issues with it. So some people are seeing it as a promotion. Some people are also theorizing about the idea of maybe making Racing Bulls the main team and Red Bull the sister team, the little sister team this year, just because one car is seemingly easier to run and easier to get up to the points, whereas the other one is meant to be a big name, it's meant to be a big thing, and it's just not where it should be. But that's just a theory people are throwing around. So Lawson is out of Red Bull Racing and he's now in Racing Bulls again after 2 races, which was quite a brutal move, but I see why they did it. It was just not his time to be there. He needs to work on his management of, well, anyone will struggle in such a car like Red Bull is this year, but he needs more practice in a car that's easier to drive before he steps back up to such a prominent seat as Red Bull Racing has in that second driver's seat. And as a result, Yuki Tsunoda, although he finished 16th, he is now in Red Bull Racing. So according to what everyone is saying, including the main management of Red Bull Racing, so that's Christian Horner and Helmut Marko, it looks like Tsunoda, regardless of what happens, is there until the end of the year. Obviously, you know, the decisions in Red Bull Racing change quicker than their underwear, so you don't know how long that's going to last. But hopefully Yuki will stay in that seat for at least the end of the year, and hopefully for much longer, unless another team swipes him up real quick, and then we don't know what happens afterwards. It's obviously too early to promote Hadjar because he's only just joined this year. Lawson had 11 races beforehand in 2024 and 2023 combined, so he's a little bit more experienced, but for both of them it's way too early to be in such a big team as Red Bull Racing. So yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed everything for Yuki goes well. And that's it for China. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and the big news that I have for you is that now, after every race weekend, we will have an extra podcast episode where we will move these race rundowns to Monday, and we will carry on Saturdays with more educational videos about Formula One. So stay tuned for that. This Monday we will have the Japanese Grand Prix race rundown, and then next week we'll be back to our regularly scheduled content on a Saturday. And thank you once again, thank you so much for listening. Please check out all of my lovely colleagues on the Be The Change Media Network. Check out our website for stickers, BeTheChangeMediaNetwork.com. Have a lovely weekend. I'll see you on Monday. Goodbye.